Alright, so in this video, I am going to be analyzing my thoughts on what the Mets are doing this offseason, because trust me, it is very bad. Normally, I wouldn't do it this way, where I literally have it recording me like this, but unfortunately, I'm riding a bicycle right now in a hotel, so like one of those elliptical bicycles, so there's really no other way for me to do this, and yeah, so by the time this video is uploaded, the signing should be official. It was reported yesterday about the Mets signing Bo Bichette, and I just don't get it. Personally, I kind of thought that if the Mets really were going to rebuild, which is what Stearns made it seem like, why are they spending all this money? You know, $295 million is still below the luxury tax. Signing $42 million a year for Bo Bichette, it just doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, seeing as, Bo Bichette, seeing as Bo Bichette is an expensive player, you're now going to be over the luxury tax threshold, which, if you're competing, doesn't really make, a big difference. But part of it is that your draft pick gets reduced 10 spots if you exceed the luxury tax. So by the Mets doing all this, they're now ensuring the fact that they're going to have a worse draft pick, which they might need if the season goes the way I think it's going to go, seeing as, they've downgraded multiple positions. Now, Edwin Diaz, I get it. The Mets tried to re-sign, he wouldn't, and you instead of Devin Williams. And I don't hate it because, while Diaz was a 2025 reliever of the year, the 2024 reliever of the year was Devin Williams. I get that he imploded in the playoffs. Believe me, I do. As a Mets fan, we were on the other end of that. But but the thing that you have to realize is that how you do in the playoffs, it only matters if you make it to the playoffs first. And honestly, if the Mets can make it to even just the wild card round, given how different their core is going to look, even that would still be a big plus for this team if they can at least make it to the wild card round. That's honestly beyond my expectations. I mean, I'm not saying I'll be satisfied because it depends on how it goes, but if the Mets can make it to the playoffs, that would be a big bonus, but I honestly don't see that happening. But Williams and Diaz, I'll say this, relievers are temperamental. So, just because Diaz was great in 2025 and he also was great in 2022, 2023 he got injured in the World Baseball Classic, sat out the whole year, came back in 2024, but was really bad at the start of the year, posting an ERA of almost 9 in the month of April, blowing 4 saves, and even worse, blowing a game that wasn't a save because it was because it was a 4-run game and saves are only 3 games below. That was the worst. And, obviously Diaz improved after that, but he still blew some games. He honestly, blew some games when it mattered most, seeing as Diaz wound up collapsing in the Braves-Mets game, just that the Mets offense bailed him out in the 9th inning. And again, in the NLDS Game 2 against the Phillies, just that it wound up not mattering again because the Mets wound up winning that series in 4 games. Still, though, he's a guy who I feel like is inconsistent. He has the potential to be very well, but again, as I've said about relievers, they're temperamental. Devin Williams was great in 2023. 2024, he started off on the Yankees like crap, but eventually, even he was able to regain his form. That's kind of why I think that I don't totally hate that move. What I do hate, though, is the whole run prevention thing, and you're having, if you have Polanco at first or and put Bichette at third, and who knows where Brett Beatty's going to go. I get that you could DH Bichette. That makes the most sense to me, and then have Beatty at third, and not the carousel. Just try and trade away Mark Vientos, Luis Angel Acuna, Ronnie Mauricio, have them be backups. I don't totally hate that, but you can't have Bichette at third because he doesn't know how to play third. You still don't have a left fielder. I don't know what you're going to do about that because you traded away Nimmo, which, again, if the Mets had a consistent plan, I wouldn't hate it. The problem with the Mets is that they're both trying to compete and rebuild for the future. Usually when you do that, you wind up getting neither. Look at the Atlanta Falcons. They infamously both traded Kirk Cousins traded for Kirk Cousins and also signed Michael Penix Jr. They drafted him in the draft, but that wound up backfiring catastrophically as the Falcons went 8-9 the last 2 years, missed the playoffs both years in a pretty bad NFC South division. It's not even like he was in a competitive division. He was in the NFC South, and he still couldn't win in that division. And that was just a terrible, terrible decision. Everyone laughed at it at the time, and it makes just as much sense now as it did back then. But still, just trying to do the same thing. I get that you're trying to fix the run prevention, and Pete Alonso, to be fair, was really bad at defense. And you really can't DH him because eventually you got to figure Soto soon is going to have to move to first base because or not just first base, or be a DH because he's also really bad in the outfield. He might be one of the worst defensive outfielders that we have in the league. But so I get not wanting to re-sign Pete Alonso, especially if he's going to demand that kind of money that he wound up getting from Baltimore. And Nimmo, again, it's a big contract. He's declining offensively, declining defensively, and Jeff McNeil always had to go. So I get all those moves. But if you're doing that, you're really doing it to try to rebuild for the future. Maybe have Mark Vientos play first base, even though he's really bad both there and at first base, and give him a chance. Have Mauricio on your infield as well, and then Brett Beatty, who we know can do well. Bring up Carson Bench and have him play in the outfield. Rely on your young pitchers, Nolan McLean, Jonah Tong, Brennan Sproat, hope that they can get you somewhere. Maybe hope that Sean Manaea can come back to form, Kodai Senga can come back to form. You still have David Peterson. The problem with the Mets is not really pitching. It's just that the pitchers are bad, but I kind of get Sterner's philosophy of just trying to ride with the kids and hope that they can carry you. The issue then becomes, if you're truly rebuilding, why are you re-signing these players? Devin Williams, I get it. You let Diaz walk, you kind of have to have a closer, which the Mets don't really have in their farm system. So that I completely get Devin Williams. Jorge Polanco, he's another guy who, to an extent, makes sense. He walked off the Mariners in the ALDS, so you have a clutch hitter on the team. Part of the problem with the Mets was they did not have a single comeback when they trailed after 8 innings. Now, in 4 cases, they actually wound up tying up the game and still losing anyway. That happened 4 times. But the Mets just could not come back to win a game. Their last win after trailing in the 8th inning was October 3rd, 2024, Game 3 of the National League Wildcard Series. A big time for it to happen, but the Mets just completely lost their clutch gene in 2025. So it's basically been the moment that a team takes the lead on them and has the lead after 8, the Mets just rolled over and died. And that's really impressive how bad they were in that scenario. So having these guys on your team who are clutch hitters makes sense, but they're bad defensively and they're playing way out of position. But, I get Polanco, I get Williams, but just in no way can I defend what Stearns is doing here. Cohen, it makes no sense to sign. Bo Bichette is a move that a team makes if they're going all in. Mets clearly aren't doing that, which makes sense given how disastrous the 2025 season went. But I just can't see a scenario where this works out. What do I think is going to happen? I think if the Mets don't make the playoffs in 2026, at the very least, Carlos Mendoza is fired. Mendoza was a guy who, even in 2024, when they made it to the NLCS, I was never really impressed by his managerial skills. It was always felt that Buck Showalter was better, and Mendoza just got lucky with the team that he had around him. And 2025 confirmed everything I thought about him in a negative sense. Stearns, meanwhile, he seems to have a plan, and I mean, maybe his plan will work out. I think if the Mets are to play in 2026, if Stearns' plan seems to be backfiring and everything he preached turns out to, not be happening because of his awful plan, I think he's gone. I think if his plan seems to work out, but it was more so Mendoza making awful decisions in the bullpen, which we all know can very well happen. I think in that scenario, we can see maybe potentially David Stearns keep his job and at the same time see Mendoza still get fired, though Stearns can still get fired for refusing to fire Mendoza. Reality is, someone like David Stearns is not going to work well with Steve Cohen. He's not going to win you a championship, and the conflicting ideologies are just going to doom this team into perennial mediocrity.